Hello and welcome to the 10k sub special. You sent in some ideas and I did them, so let's get into it. If you were to have 4 players without repeating anything, well, you'd have no real choice but to go with Crew Chief, Maniac, Tag Team, and a Stoic. Or in the spot of a Stoic, a Kingpin, or a Leech, or a Hacker, or whatever else. It doesn't really matter at that point anyway. If the Maniac is doing damage, the Tag Team player tags the quote-unquote main player, and the Crew Chief just exists, whatever deck you have in the main slot isn't going to die. As for the weapon choices, the Tag Team player should use Commando Bulletstorm, the Maniac player use Gas Spam, the Crew Chief, well, it doesn't really matter. The Crew Chief really just needs to exist. Hell, put Saws on him if you feel like it. The main player should get something like a Dragon's Breath Grim. And now you have an unkillable tank that can walk through everything while being healed by a Tag Team Commando Spammer, with permanent damage reduction from Gas Spam Maniac, and a Crew Chief that just saws open a door every now and then. However, this is really unnecessary because you might as well just 4-stack on the same OP build. For example, Teamwork build. And this is because Payday isn't really a co-op game. The game buffs players so much that you're really just playing a 4-player solo at any given time. There's no real reason to synergize, strategize, or anything else that starts with an S and ends in I's. To be honest, I can't really say if Payday lost the co-op aspect, because I can't really remember if it was ever needed. As a reminder, I only started actively playing the game after hard but fair difficulty didn't really exist anymore. As I just mentioned, I wouldn't call Death Sentence hard but fair. It's hard, but it's only hard through stupid methods. It's the only game mode that is fun for me, since I've gotten used to the jump in difficulty from everything else. I'd wager that this is how every experienced player sees the game anymore. As for the inexperienced perspective, well, I'm sure they would agree with the hard and unfair assessment. I've recently come to experience Creepy's Eclipse Total Overhaul, so I've seen what Death Sentence could be. If I were to describe that difficulty, I'd call it Death Sentence if it was Death Wish but still Death Sentence. I hope that makes even a lick of sense, but it's really just a very punishing yet very fair difficulty that's a lot of fun to play. And since it rebalances weapons, decks, and skills, it's sort of like rediscovering Payday. If Overkill were to change Death Sentence, I would say to mold it more into that. If there was anything I want Overkill to do to Payday 2, it would be to just leave the balancing alone and not touch it anymore. Somehow every step they take is in the wrong direction, and I don't really know how. Though, I guess that's something I would want Overkill to stop doing. To answer the question, I want Overkill to just think about the balance of the game a little more critically. There are ways to make weapons unique without just making them stronger than the last, which is basically what Overkill seems to be doing. I'm really not a fan of gas. It's fire but better, takes less effort to use, and comes with no downside other than not seeing the game anymore. I also feel zero satisfaction from using it. The satisfaction that comes with weapons in this game is incredibly good. The visual, sound, and animation work on a lot of weapons is just top tier. Well, some of them. When a gun just feels as good to use as some of these guns do, it increases the enjoyment of the game tenfold. These designs are what make some of my favorite weapons in the game. If we're talking about weapons that have exceptional feel, then there are a few that I adore. I like the rifles in this game, and the AMR-16 is truly a cut above the rest. Moving over to shotguns, the Predator is my favorite of all time. This gun bleeds power, just listen to the sound it makes. And if you're going by sound, the Rattlesnake is a great sniper rifle. It has a unique sound, both silenced and not, and that's on top of the great recoil, design, and animation. And just to make sure the secondaries get some love, the 5.7 is a masterclass of design. It really is great in every way. However, not every gun can be a winner. With 200 weapons, not everything can stand out by being interesting. The weapon bloat in Payday is obnoxious. If at one point it was possible, well, it no longer is to make everything unique. Weapon choice nowadays is just aesthetic, because if you want the best, there's an objective best in every category you go to. If you want to look at weapons that are unique, welcome to the Special tab. However, I do think the Special tab suffers a bit from, well, how do I put this? Consistency? The Special tab is home to some of the worst, and also the best weapons in the game, as well as some of the most okay ones. Honestly, aside from just equalizing the balance between these, I wouldn't touch the Special tab. Though if we were to get something else that's comically big, I would want something in that special section. More specifically, just a comically big Nerf gun. Although stupid and probably unusable in every imaginable aspect, I think it would be a cute addition. To continue on with my changes, I would like to make some changes to maps. Personally, I'd like to see some maps repurposed and enhanced. I've talked to a modder about remixing maps, just leaving the map there, but changing the objectives and everything else around it, since I can't really do anything myself, but they said that this would be something doable, and even something they're willing to do, when they have the time at least. Speaking of time, speedrunning. In theory, I'd love to speedrun for this game. I certainly have the know-how, skill, and time to dedicate to some runs. I mean, this pointless Garrett-killing speedrun took me about 20 minutes to do. However, I have absolutely no interest in speedrunning because of the rules this game has. To officially speedrun, you have to play modless aside from the speedrunning mod and sometimes RNG modifier. However, if you'll notice by my beautifully cultivated mod list that I spent many hours making and many years collecting mods for, I don't really want to go modless. I like my game exactly as it is, aesthetically and in every other way. I get why this rule is in place, but that doesn't mean I like it. And because of that, I just don't speedrun, at least officially. I have some speedruns on my channel, as well as a couple saved on my drive, but those are really just for fun and unofficial. And now, to ruin my perfect full combo of leading into the next section smoothly, here's something that I have no idea how to lead into.
Привет, с вами Керрот. За мои многотысячные часы в этой игре я решил, что мне надо сделать ультиматный билд. Из-за этого билда меня люди много звали читера, потому что как хорошо я играл. Оружие, конечно, изма и судья. Да вообще нет другого в этой игре, который даже может стоять. Анархист самый лучший перк в игре. И это все скиллы. Именно этот билд я пользовал, чтобы делать 350 тысяч трупов в этой игре. Каким-то способом это мне не надоело за много тысяч часов, и я никогда не решил что-то другое учить.
The build I have for you might not exactly be what you expected, but I think it's an entertaining bit. If you know what it's a reference to, then you might be slightly more entertained. My favorite map in the game is Goat Simulator, since it's a very unique map and actually has some challenge to it. Most maps in the game I can just brain off through, but Goat Sim is one of the few maps in the game that makes me think. Do I want it in Payday 3? Well, I can't say I would. I'd like to see how Payday 3 plays before I think about which map would port well into it. One massive part of how Payday 3 will play is how the objectives on it go. I'm not a fan of the Payday 2 objectives that boil down to just sit here. They're a necessary evil, but nobody wants to babysit the BFD for 35 minutes. Waiting for a drill to drop and then having to drill it is fine, but there's nothing I hate more than objectives that exist just to pad out time. What I want in Payday 3 is a new type of objective that requires teamwork, a la 2 things at once in different places of the map. I'd like Payday 3 to be an actual team game, but that's not in my control. I can't imagine the scaling of Payday 3 to be like that of Payday 2. The amount of outrage and hate the scaling in this game gets is almost comical, but I can see where it comes from. In all fairness, it would be a challenge to make difficulty scaling this bad again, but who knows, we don't really have any information to go off of. Speaking of outrage, I don't see Overkill making the mistake of adding YouTubers into Payday 3 after seeing the warm reception it had in Payday 2. In my opinion, there's nothing wrong with the characters, but the community just needs something to complain about for no reason, so Ethan and Ela are that punching bag. But if Overkill does want to add YouTubers into the game, well, you know where to find me. But if I were to add a character into the game, I just want someone with a strong personality. I like playing Ethan because he has a very strong personality and actually some great lines. The player base doesn't like him because, he doesn't fit. But that's something I never cared about. Fitting into this game doesn't mean anything considering this isn't a serious game whatsoever, so who cares? I'm sure some people cared about how everyone fits into the story and whatever, but I just can't be bothered. Personally, I still don't believe this game actually has a story. I can't tell if that's a terrible transition or a good one, but I don't think Payday 3 will be any more serious than Payday 2 is. Payday is basically the perfect game for casuals. It has an overwhelming amount of maps, enough guns that anyone can find something they like, and aside from Death Sentence, the difficulty is perfect for anyone to jump into and just play. I hope there will still be something for the sweatlords like me to enjoy in Payday 3 like I do in Payday 2, but the Payday series has taken a casual and informal departure from the serious and challenging game that was Payday the Heist. As for what I would like in Payday 3, variety but with balance. I like to play everything in Payday 2, which is why I have builds for anything you can imagine. However, some of the stuff I stay away from even if I really want to play it, because of how trivial it makes the game for me. I'd love to just play everything and have it be balanced. It's not really a list, but I've mentioned a lot of other stuff I'd like throughout this video anyway. One thing I don't want is for money to matter. Right now, Payday is arcadey, and I'm into it. The issue I have with making money matter is that it would make me grind until I max out whatever features it gives before I can actually enjoy the game. Personally, Payday is really easy to enjoy because the money is just optional. I can ignore it completely and do whatever else I want instead. Though if I wanted to have money do something while still keeping the arcadey elements, how about using it as a scoreboard of sorts? Of course, if that was a thing, then actual anti-cheat would have to exist in Payday 3, which is not guaranteed. This would make the money mean something, at least in my eyes, while still not being super forced onto players. As for one thing I'm not sure about adding into Payday 3, more movement. It would need to be handled well. Right now, I don't see anything the game is missing. Sliding would not be a good idea at all. Unlike vaulting, sliding is a very far departure from every other movement in the game, and I don't want it to be added. I've seen the sliding in hyper heisting, and it's really just fucking annoying for no reason. If it was a separate keybind, I would never use it anyway. I can't really find a purpose for sliding in this game, but vaulting is a bit different. In Payday, you can just jump over everything. If vaulting were to just give a different animation when jumping over something, for example, one-handing your gun and vaulting with the other, I wouldn't be against it. It would just add some spice with no downsides. But if you could only jump over stuff by vaulting in a way that forces movement, that would be awful. There's nothing that would break the action more than pressing a button and then having a pseudo cutscene of your character climbing over a box, unable to shoot or look at anything. This next section is going to be about the Payday community related stuff rather than the games themselves, so let's start with what I think about the community. I don't know. I can't generalize the thousands of players in this game. Let me remind you that I live in the corner that is Death Sentence Loud. Loud Death Sentence is a tiny part of the community, not to mention a majority are just playing for their achievements rather than the difficulty itself. In a way, Death Sentence is fun because there's new names that I join all the time for public games, and occasionally I'll see a name that I recognize in there. As for the avid Death Sentence playing community, it's fine. I can't say that I know every single person, but I'd like to believe that I've met a majority of consistent DS Loud players, and from that, I can't really complain too much. Aside from a few bad apples, it's just good people all around. But really, you can say that about practically any community, can't you? As for the online community, well, it's okay. I've made my thoughts on Reddit stuff known already, so I won't really repeat that. The Steam forums are different, because a lot of it is just tech support. For the parts that aren't just, why isn't this working, the community is just the same as Reddit, but less annoying. Speaking of those Redditors, yes. I can see why Redditors would think I'm toxic, as that's the platform where I hold back the least. If you think I'm bluntly honest on YouTube, well, Reddit is even less sugar-coated. I have no time for Reddit's bullshit and pretension, so I just say what needs to be said in as few words as possible. But of course, toxicity is seen differently by everyone. To an extent, almost everyone is toxic in some way or another. But unless it turns into your personality, then a bit of toxicity doesn't really matter in my eyes. Though I say that as, of course, the toxic person I am, so it's pretty biased, or something along those lines. If I were to have the attention of the entire community, both in-game and the online parts, well... Although if I really were to say something, I wish people would just play around with more stuff. People very rarely depart from what they're comfortable with, especially on Death Sentence. However, I think that playing variety is so much more fun and engaging than just the same builds every time. As I just mentioned, I don't really want to do this. You can go to just about anyone else in the world for standard good builds, but I don't think that's why people come to my channel. I understand that not everyone has my same interests, but I wouldn't make videos for stuff that doesn't interest me, and so I don't really plan on doing more normal builds unless I have a reason to. Speaking of standard good builds, the best builds. I don't think the problem with big payday YouTubers, which I guess I'm a part of now, is making awful builds. The builds are fine. The issue is calling the builds best. There is no best build, it just isn't a thing. And so no matter what the build is, there will always be something that can be changed. Because of that, titling anything to be best, in any game, not just Payday, is a dangerous game to play, and I don't think it can end well. This next section will be about tier lists, but only those that people have asked for, rather than my personal ridiculous ones. Maybe I'll make a return of those one day, but not for now. Though this first one is a disappointment, since I don't really want to do a heist tier list. Since Overkill is still adding maps, I'd like for them to finish that before I make a list of them. I do have something planned regarding maps coming soon TM, but when that exactly is, I can't say. Now let's move on to the actual tier lists. Ranking every weapon is absurd, there's just too many of them. But the weapon classes aren't that insane, so I might as well rank them by how much I like them. Let's start with rifles, which I adore. Strong start, right? They look cool, sound cool, and have nice animations. And have a pretty good variety between the damage classes. There's a lot to pick from, and I find it hard not to enjoy all of them in their own ways. LMGs are, well, they're okay. I used to use them more, but I sort of got tired of their power. It's still very easy to put an LMG on any build and have it work wonders, but I'm not really into it anymore. I don't really feel anything aside from only a few LMGs. I still find shotguns to be really fun. Well, most of them. Despite their nerfs, nothing about their strength has actually changed. They're just marginally more annoying to use. Not a big deal, I still love their designs for the most part. Sniper rifles are the strongest class of weapons in this game, thanks entirely to Greys. That said, they feel almost identical unless you move between damage tiers, which is a downside. Another downside is they're pretty heavily power crept, with a best option in every tier. However, grazing enemies does feel pretty good, and is basically the only redeeming quality. SMGs are just secondary rifles, which is why I like them as much. There's tons of variety, good looks, and sounds overall, and it's really hard to complain about them. I wish I had more reason to use pistols, but sadly I don't. They're okay. Pistols feel too similar to each other no matter the damage class, and they all play the exact same. There's also way too many of them, so I just don't care for pistols. Aside from the 5.7, that is. The special weapon category is surprisingly fun, aside from a few bad apples. Explosions, bullet hoses, and fire are lots of fun to mess around with, and excluding the tragic balancing, I can't really find anything to complain about here. And now for the akimbo weapons, starting with shotguns. Underwhelming. There's only 3 of them, to be fair, but they miss out on having good animations. They sound good, but it doesn't really matter considering they all shoot very fast on account of having 2 of them. Akimbo SMGs suffer from the same issues that akimbo shotguns do, lacking the fun animations. However, unlike shotguns, there's a fuck ton of these, and because of how fast they output damage, they all feel the same, unlike their single counterparts. The akimbo pistols suffer from the aforementioned akimbo problems, on top of the problems that come with being pistols. I basically don't like using them at all. They're below average when it comes to performance, they're below average aesthetically, and they're below average in the variety department. I just don't care for them at all. Well, I like the Contractor Sniper more than the pistol, and I like the pistol more than the akimbo pistols. So, list over. Just kidding. I don't like Bane's heist aside from Reservoir Dogs. Bane is just the least interesting contractor with his 65 variations of bank heist, jewelry stores, and transports. Alesso sucks, Cook-Off is a waste of time, and Art Gallery is just plain boring. The rest are stealth-only heists, which I also don't care for. In stark contrast to Bane, the classics are all bangers. Fun, well-designed, good-looking maps that offer a wide array of stuff to do and various levels of difficulty. I've done 6 out of the 9 of these maps over 100 times on Death Sentence, and if I were to add up the total number of times I've completed each of these, then the classics would have been completed 903 times. Now if you compare that to Bane, which has more than double the amount of maps and only sits at 318 completions, you can see why I consider the classics S tier. The events are aight. They're unique enough to make them interesting to play every now and then, but they're fairly short maps, and if you don't like the gimmick they bring, well, you aren't going to like them. Across these 4 maps, I've done them 313 times. Gemma McShay's first addition to the game so far, Midland Ranch, was not a good showing. Gemma has a lot of making up to do in the rest of the Texas campaign if she doesn't want to sit in D tier. Since the release about a month ago, I've played Midland Ranch once and haven't touched it since. I've gone on record saying that Hector's maps haven't aged well, and they really haven't. I'd be okay with the idea of 2 and even 3-day heists if they were interesting, but Hector literally just takes the worst parts of Bane's heist and then adds filler garbage. Do you really want to play Cook-Off, an escape, a 15-second visit to some boring hotel, another fucking escape, and then a 15-second bus assassination thing? No? Well, sucks then, because Hector's maps pose no challenges, aren't interesting visually, and the maps themselves are just boring. I've done Hector's maps 57 times, and even then, that's just from Watch Dogs heavy lifting the rest of them. Not to say that Watch Dogs is a good map either, it's just the least bad Hector map. Jimmy isn't for me. He has 2 maps, a stealth only and a broken loud only. The stealth only doesn't matter to me, but the loud only is just disappointing. I play on death sentence, so I want to be hit by enemies and to actually feel it. The Russian enemy faction, however, just doesn't work. The enemies here do way less damage than they should, creating a sort of death sentence kids version. I've done Jimmy's maps 48 times, which may sound like a lot considering where I placed it. However, know that Murky Station only has 2 of these completions, and the rest of those are from when I was trying to grind Infamy on release of that update. Boiling Point is so easy that I could do it at level 35 and then just use the death sentence multiplier to get way more experience than I deserved for the effort I put into the map. I like Gao Feng's maps for the most part. Ukrainian Prisoner is pretty mid to be honest, but Dragon Heist carries the Contractor all the way to B tier. Fun, nice on the eyes, and pretty well designed. I don't have too much to say about it. I have 58 completions across Gao Feng's 2 maps. I love Locke's maps with exception of the stealth-only Breaking Feds. All of his maps feel like a journey and a half on their own, since they're super unique and just great all around. I don't even know what else to say. The maps are all certified bangers. Excluding the literal single completion I've done on Breaking Feds, I've done the other 11 maps 941 times. Although I like the one map we have of Shayu's, Mountain Master isn't flawless, mainly because the boss fight at the end just sucks. I don't think there will be any more maps contracted by her, which means this one map will forever just be the legacy. Gemma McShay may blow me away with her next maps, but Shayu sits in limbo forever with the 12 Mountain Master completions. The Butcher could have been so much more. Scarface Mansion is a great map, but the others, well, they're the Bomb series. Bomb Forest sucks, so much more could have been done with the map, but the objectives make this map a literal AFK simulator. You can sit there for 20 minutes and do nothing, which isn't helped by the fact that enemies literally just can't pathfind up the hill for God knows what reason. As for Bomb Dockyard, well, it's just unremarkable. The hack overstays its welcome, meaning I get a good look at the map around me, only to realize that it's not very good. And after that, well, you get to sit there and wait for the boat to move. And then you sit there waiting for drills. Again, so much more could have been done with this map. I've done these 3 maps 71 times, 51 of which are just Scarface Mansion. The Continental is in the same position as Jimmy, just that the loud-only map is a good one. Despite that fact, I can't really justify putting it any higher than C, because even if half of it is a perfect score, the other half is a solid 0. I've completed the Continental maps 144 times, and 2 of those completions are held by Yacht Heist. If you were to remove Golden Grin's Snooze Fest, the Dentist would easily go into S tier, but alas, he is weighed down because of it. The Dentist's maps are iconic and feel great to play. Aside from Hawks and Breakout, they're all a good medium difficulty that I would say is accessible to most players. Combine that with them being unique and well designed, and the Dentist easily deserves a spot in A tier. I've done his 6 maps 588 times, only 9 of which belong to GGC. The Elephant is another waste of potential like the Butcher. Biker Heist isn't bad, even if Day 2 is a bit, well, it exists. Big Oil Day 1 is padding to fill time, but Day 2 is a puzzle. It's not too hard to solve. I mean, 5 minutes of Googling and you can learn it for the rest of your life, but it's cute. Election Day 1 is another pad, but it matters what you will do on it. Pick the right truck, and you'll go to a boring map. Pick the wrong one, and you'll end up in a surprisingly fun bank heist. I wish you could just skip that pointless wait, but it is what it is. Framing Frame, well, it's Framing Frame. Day 1 sucks, it's hard to justify Day 2 as a day, and Day 3 sucks even more than Day 1. I finished these 4 maps 106 times. Vlad has some great maps, and also some very okay ones. If you were to trim the fat, Vlad would end up in S tier, since he has a similar situation to the Dentist. His heists have a lot of variety, personality, and vary greatly in difficulty, which I don't think is a bad thing. Some of them are just a little boring in my opinion. Overall, I've done his 13 maps 382 times. And to finish off this list, we have Hoxton. You may be confused as to why he's here, but technically the Safe House raid is accredited to him, so I count it. That said, Safe House raid is kinda boring, and I've only finished it 26 times on Death Sentence. And if you haven't been keeping count, that means I finished a total of 3,969 games on just Death Sentence. One thing that is sort of random but makes me wonder is why Gemma McShay and Gao Feng get their first and last names while no one else does. It's not like we don't know Vlad and Locke's full names, so what's up with that? This section doesn't really have any questions. It's just a couple of weird requests people had for me. I figured, in all my genius, that I would just combine them into one. Anyway, here's my fridge, inside of which is a sandwich. This sandwich contains cereal, so let's try that out. Delicious. This final section I didn't really know how to put into a category, so let's get into a series of somewhat random questions. I don't know if I can describe my music taste easily. I kind of like everything as long as it isn't noisy. Aside from that, I'm really not into whatever pop music is playing on the radio, so I just don't listen to it. Considering how wide my music tastes are, that makes my playlist a little bit weird, since I can listen to something like Anitra's Dance, Badland, No Cock Like Horsecock, Mob Psycho Opening, and Operation Blacklight back to back with no questions asked. My sister's also trying to get me into K-pop, mostly unsuccessfully because I just don't care for pop music, but I found a couple songs that I like so far. This question is pretty easy to solve. Rust is already close to dying since he's one of the oldest in the Payday gang, so might as well just finish him off. As for who I'd finish off in the other sense of the phrase, that goes to Jacket. Though it might be a bit awkward to fuck Jacket with his whole silence thing, there's no way I'm marrying someone who I can't even talk to. That leaves only Ethan to marry, which, I mean, hey, it's what's left. I think pineapples are pretty fucking sick, but I think they would also be harder to brand than a carrot. Well, the best I could do is this list from steamid.uk. I only started messing with my name in 21, but even then, I can't recall all of these. So the only other option I have is the 10 names that Steam says. In order of oldest to current, they are Calzone, Castanet, Clarinet, Cornwallis, Cowabunga, Cappuccino, Colonialism, Cosmonaut, Catastrophic, and Calamity. In a way, I take inspiration from everyone. Since I'm the generation that grew up with YouTube, I've seen how videos progressed from when I first watched YouTube in 2009 to now, so I know what I like and what I don't. I then use that to make my own videos. As for direct inspiration, well, I can't say that I have anyone. My style, I guess if you can call it that, is a mix of everything I've seen up to this point. This kind of leans into what I said, since I found that I like videos most when they're informative and lighthearted. I wouldn't really say my videos are funny, but I try to keep them informal for the most part. What is funny and what isn't is a subjective thing, but I like the quips and references that I put into my videos, even if I wouldn't really classify them as jokes. As I am an epic gamer, I play many games. That said, I don't really want to make content on all of them. For example, I love Celeste. I mean, it's my favorite game. That said, what kind of content would I make on it? I'm not very good at making levels with the editor, I can't make guides on anything that isn't already been done, and I sure as hell can't beat GM plus 2 maps. Another game I play a lot is Geometry Dash. I like music and the rhythm of stuff, but again, I can't do anything in the editor, and I'm not an ultra amazing player anyway. I drop random stuff I do into a playlist, but it's not really content that many would want to watch. I've been playing a lot of Deep Rock Galactic, but I can't imagine myself doing content on it. In Payday, I sort of have a reputation for playing anything and everything. In DRG, well, I guess you can classify me as a specialist of sorts. I used to play a lot of Binding of Isaac, but aside from doing a daily run or something, there's no real content to do here. And I also don't want to go back to this game since I have to finish off these terrible characters. Sure, I could do these ideas, it's just that people wouldn't really watch them. If I were to make another type of content, it very likely wouldn't be video game related. As for rebalances, well, I just don't really want to play them. Most just don't interest me. The conclusion I come to is that I'm basically just built to make payday videos. And so, that concludes this subscriber special. If your idea wasn't included, sorry, but it sucked. Just kidding. There's a lot of ideas that weren't bad, but they just didn't pan out. I've had a lot of comments asking in general for a video about my mod list, but I don't know if that would be interesting to watch, as I already have basically everything down in this spreadsheet. A couple people also suggested another song, that one being I Will Give You My All, but I couldn't find an instrumental version of it. Even without it, this video is already very long, but I hope that it was worth the watch. I'll probably return with another special at 15k, assuming my channel doesn't die by that point, so keep your hopes up for making it into that one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.